Almost everybody I talk to defines this terminology different. This word SDR, this word BDR is such a commonly used phrase in today's sales society and sales landscape. But almost everybody kind of has a different thing of what that means. To you, if I ask you, Daniel, what is an SDR? What is it to you?
Yeah, so really at the end of the day, it does come down to the organizational structure of the company you're working for. But really, SDR, BDR is somebody who creates pipeline for the sales team and the sales company, whether that's 100% inbound, 100% outbound, an all bound mix of both. I've seen it where companies have either or SDRs, BDRs, XDRs that handle the inbound and the outbound motions.
Mhm.
And then larger companies, you might typically see SDRs are exclusively handling the inbound sales team and the inbound conversions from marketing. And then the BDR team is focused solely on the outbound space. And then, of course, XDRs, ADRs are pretty similar in the sense of one or the other, but there's a lot of different terms out there for
Okay,
sure.
you've introduced a new one to me. ADR, is that account development?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. I've seen ADR a few times
So
now.
would an ADR be more of an internal support model, like I'm managing and developing current clients and into bigger picture sales opportunities? Is that typically what an ADR would be for?
Yeah, traditionally, organizations that work on an account or named account basis would
Mhm.
maybe call it an ADR as
Okay.
opposed to an S or a BDR. Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, look, we can all look at your background. You've got an impressive resume of leadership in this space. Okay. Now, the question I would have for you first would be, do you have a niche inside of this, what we just described is such a broad implementation of that common used SDR, inbound, outbound, ADR, SDR, BDR? Do you have a specific thing you specialize in that landscape?
Yeah, if I really had to pick one thing, it would be my experience and skill set building programs from the ground up. So,
Mm.
two of the past four companies I've led, they had no sales development of any kind, and they brought me in to provide a proof of concept, essentially. Do the role for 1 to 2 months, show that we can generate pipeline and then quality revenue as well. And then they gave me the keys to build the program, hire my team, buy the tech stack, write the playbook, and really scale it from, just me up to as many as 14 that I've led in the past.
Got you. Okay. All right. So let's double click on that because I'm very excited about that process. Company hires you. They first says, before you manage anybody, before you hire anybody, even though you've done the job before, go do it for us for a little bit. I think that's imperative that if you are a sales leader and you are starting at a new organization that doesn't have a proven model, you have to go in and prove the model before you hire for that said model. That's kind of ultimately what you first want to do, correct?
Correct. Yeah, especially if it is a company that is owned by something like a PE firm or a large board of trustees or something like that, where spending money is much tighter. And you might see people that are a lot more skeptical, especially if they've never been in, sales, business development themselves.
Okay. Now, when you're building out the model, so we've done it, we've proven it, we've gone in, we've taken our licks, we've gotten the nose, we figured out what works. Now we're in a position, and these companies are hiring you to prove it, then build it, right? That's a part of the pre-agreement, right? So, part of that process, you said you write a playbook. Now, do you think that playbook should generally be the same thing in regards to the teams that you manage? Or is every organization slightly different based off of the organizational structure that is beneficial to that business sector?
Yeah, so, the table of contents page will be very similar, but everything beyond that is going to be wildly different based on the
Mhm.
organization you work for. And the big reason why is number one, the tech stack and the tools they already have in place, whether, it's a CRM, a marketing automation tool, the SOPs for all of those are going to be extremely different. And then, assuming the companies our competitors, they aren't selling to the exact same industry, the exact same ICP, every single company you work for, the messaging and the outreach you're going to be doing there is also quite different. So, for example, I'm a huge proponent of still using, Zoom info, still hitting up the phones, and companies that rely more heavily on the phones might need a parallel dialer as opposed to a company that's more of a 50-50 mix with, emails, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and these other tools for outreach now.
It's interesting because as you say it, I agree with the answer that you gave, but I also probably take a slightly different approach. My personal business, right? So
Yeah.
for the listeners that listen, I mean, just to kind of give you an eye behind my process, is I've got a general offense I run. And for me, part of me qualifying whether that company is a company that I want to invest my time is are you going to be willing to run my offense and not the alternative way around? And I think there's a benefit of being able to be fluid and agile to conform to what the business needs, to saying, you hire me because I build this, right? And I
Mhm.
build, probably no different, not doesn't sound much different than you. I build sales organizations from the SDR up. I believe you hire SDRs with little to no experience. You train them, develop them. Typically, SDRs with me inside of 6 months have a clear career path to grow to become a junior AE, a career path to become an AE, and to be able to grow and create that competitional growth inside. If a company doesn't want to run that offense, it's fine. There's other leaders who can run successful offenses that are not that. That's just the offense I run. Do you find yourself, maybe as you do this a little longer, refining that, like this is what Daniel does? Or do you feel like there's value in just being able to be fluid?
Yeah, there's definitely value in being fluid and having, multiple tools in the tool
Hmm.
bag, especially if, executive leadership or your direct manager changes and then you have to deal with new voices and new philosophies coming in. So can a bit tricky if you're just, planting your flag in the ground in
Yeah.
one spot. But that being said, you know what works. We know what we've done that's successful, and we don't want to stray too far from that just to accommodate a new voice in the room either. So, it's a politics game, especially in the corporate world. But that's kind of what sales development's all about. Cooperating and hearing all the voices in the room, whether it's marketing, demand gen, sales itself, and then putting all the pieces together.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're exactly right. And I would tell you that, man, it gives me kind of like goosebumps. It kind of puts shivers down my spine still when I think about the politics inside of the corporate
Yeah.
world. And that's, I mean, the reality behind ultimately why I created the company I created as a consultant, which is to allow me to have a little bit more say in that process. But at the end of the day, whether I'm getting my paycheck as a consultant or as a W-2 employee, I still got people to answer to. I still got
Yeah,
to
for sure.
conform to a person who's ultimately paying my paycheck. Um, but man, there's nothing better, Daniel, than when you have the ability to say, you, my client, don't fit what I need. I'm firing you, my client, because you're not giving me what I need. And I was in a unique opportunity this past year to be able to do that with a couple different clients where I had more demand than I had time. And I had a couple of clients that weren't worth my time to shift to other clients that would be a better worth of my time. Now,
Hmm.
one of the things you said earlier as well is you said, when we get in there, we learn it. We learn the talk track. We start hiring people. I would love to hear from you. What does the perfect SDR hire look like for you in the average scenario? And I know every company, every business sector maybe has a different profile, but if we looked at it globally, what is the perfect personality or traits or experience that you look for in an SDR?
Yeah, really, there's three things that jump off the page or off the screen to me. The first being, a positive attitude and thick skin, right? An SDR, you're going to live in a world of rejection, especially if you're 100% outbound. You're probably going to get cussed out on the
Hmm.
phone at some point, get a nasty email back, and just realizing that, every rejection and every no gets you closer to the next yes. Just having that attitude is absolutely huge. The second thing, especially for, those more green employees fresh out of college, maybe just had one or two internships or jobs, coachability, being able to read the data, understand the data, and then take what I'm directing you to do based on, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what the data says, what the top performers are doing, whatever it might be for that specific conversation, and being able to take that to heart, pivot to make the necessary changes to be even more successful. And then the very last thing is, just being focused on continuous improvement, being engaged in one on ones, wanting to see the data, wanting to learn what the top performers are doing or what's worked best in the past, and always wanting to get, just 1% better each day, each week. And then over the course of 2 quarters, 3 quarters, that's going to add up to be pretty significant.
Look, you're onto something when you've been doing this for a long time. We've never crossed paths. We happen to be from the same area physically,
Yeah.
but we've never crossed paths in business. My industry I come from is automotive. You come from a slightly different industry. Um, but my three things are the exact same thing you just mentioned. I'll put a slight modification. I say I need somebody with thick skin. I need number two, I need somebody who's got a student mentality. You said those two things right there, right? The third
Yeah.
thing I would say is I look for somebody who's self-aware. And I think that in order for you to be able to apply the coaching with the coachable mindset, you have to be able to take the coaching with thick skin, and you have to be able to understand where your gaps are. One of the other things I look for, Daniel, and I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges that I think leaders miss when hiring, which is knowing clearly what your employee's why is. And I think that's one of the biggest misses is you could have the most coachable, self-aware, thick-skinned individual, but if you as a manager, you as a leader, you as a coach, mentor, whatever you want to call yourself as a person in a leadership role, do not understand exactly how that person is driven, you're likely not going to get the most out of them. Have you found that? Like, have you seen that where you maybe had a really talented individual, but you didn't know how to motivate them versus a less talented person that you knew exactly how to press their buttons to get the most out of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially early in my career as an SDR leader, right? When you're working with organizations that do spiffs, for example, whether it's, a flat dollar amount added to their check, whether it's extra vacation time, whether it's, free food that's coming in the mail, these are all things that you would think, oh, yes, young SDR should be hungry for just more money. We all get into sales for money, right? But even more recently in my career, I've had very successful SDRs that would rather just have the time off,
Mm-hmm.
or they would just rather get free lunch, and they're not necessarily focused on maximizing every single penny out of their paycheck. It's
Yep.
also about a work-life balance, being happy with the success that you are having. And it's kind of a crazy thing to hear because growing up, my generation told work as hard as you possibly can, get every dollar, every cent you possibly can. And, that's a real good shift that I think I've seen from the people I hire, whether, they are the green or the new stage, or if they are older, more experienced, even career SDRs. So that's been interesting to see play out.
I'm going to touch back on that statement, that last three words you said, career SDRs, because I'm very interested to seeing your perspective on that because I've got a pretty strong opinion on that. But before we go to there, um, yeah, to me, it is interesting. I've had a rep. She was a little bit of an older rep. She wasn't younger. And her number one thing is I told her if you hit X amount of outcomes Monday through Thursday, then I'll let you have off 3 hours early on Friday. And that made her work far more than if I told her I'd double her pay. And it was that much more. And look, I'm a perfect example of a guy that, like, in the broad scheme of things, if I step away from myself enough, yes, money motivates me. I think money motivates everybody in the grand scheme of things, but it doesn't motivate me in the macro. It doesn't motivate me in the
Right.
day. Being able to make an extra $1,000 in a month isn't going to make me drive through that tough conversation that I just had, or to get over that loss of attitude that I've had throughout my day. I mean, those things are inevitable, but knowing what our employees here to be able to get out of this is more important. Like for me, I'm
Yeah, for sure.
super competitive, Daniel. So like you say, Matt, I can do 100 push-ups. I'm going to do 101. and I'm going to kill myself to get 101. And this just is what it is. And so, like for me, I would also make sure that my bosses knew exactly how competitive I was. So all day long, my bosses are talking shit to me. They're like, "Oh, Johnny's beating you. He's got more calls. He's doing this. He's doing that." And I was bound and determined to not let Johnny beat me. That would make me work an extra hour in my shift to make sure Johnny didn't beat me more than telling me I'm going to make an extra $1,000 on my paycheck. I was also incredibly motivated by upward growth in mobility. And so
Okay.
for me to be able to look at a month, not as in how will it maximize my paycheck, but how will I position myself for the future opportunities that I'm looking for, was how I motivated. Now, you have to understand the landscape of the organization that they're at to know if there's growth potential to be able to then say, is there growth potential, or are they at the high end of the money-making side of it or not? But you did mention career SDRs. And I see that being something that maybe is a little bit more prevalent in some worlds, but I've got a pretty firm feeling that you should never be what I describe an SDR for more than 12 months. That if you've done it for more than 12 months, and I describe an SDR as a cold calling appointment setter, somebody who was calling and developing business, and that is just a tough, tough job. And if you are not working towards advancing your role, then there's inevitable burnout in that type of role. Now, we kind of describe an SDR slightly different, so maybe that kind of creates the career SDR role. But do you believe that there should be such things as career SDRs, or where am I missing? I'm old, so you tell me.
I don't really think that's up to me. I think that's up to the SDR. So I suppose to answer your question, yes, I do
Okay.
believe that should be an option for people. Of the over 50 SDRs I've led, I've only had 4 or 5 that label themselves career SDRs, and they all have been all bound. So they're doing a mix of inbound and outbound. And I
Mhm.
definitely think that helps with the burnout that you mentioned, the wear and tear of the role. But those individuals were very happy with the company. They were very happy with leadership. They didn't want to do direct sales. They didn't want to go to marketing or customer support. And, they were happy with the money they were making and they were doing great. So I'm just happy to have them and have the experience leading them and seeing their
Yeah.
perspective because, yeah, I certainly never heard of that before I got into leadership.
Yeah, and I would say that perspective is more on me projecting my own influences, my own motivation on others instead of just meeting them where they
Sure.
are. It's probably where it is, because for me, like, there's a lot of, I recruit people that have the same traits that I have, because then I can connect with their personality and their traits far better. I don't know if I'd be able to understand somebody who had no motivation to grow. And I don't know if I'd be able to lead that person. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a very fair point, and that's where one of the things as a leader, it's our job to maximize the individuals on our team, and that means changing up our
Of
leadership
course.
style and how we motivate. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Monday morning standouts when we post a leaderboard from last week, if we have a team of 10, maybe that is extremely motivational for 6 or 8 of the 10,
Mm.
but we still need to coach, we still need to train and upskill, those remaining 2 or 4 the way they like to be motivated. So, that burden falls on us and it, it is definitely something I have learned throughout my career too.
So as an SDR leader, um, what's the approach you go about developing an SDR? Let's just as an SDR, like, let's not even talking about they're trying to become something more, they're trying to do something more. We're just trying to get the maximum out of them as an SDR. We've hired them, we've trained them, they're doing the job. What is your primary focus as a leader for the average SDR?
Yeah, so my primary focus with them is really making sure that number one, they're self aware, both of themselves and the resources available at their fingertips. Meaning, hey, we just launched this new campaign when we're a week into it. I'm going to go through that data with you to see what's working, what's not working, what our A/B tests are like. I always build custom dashboards for each team member so they can see
Mhm.
month over month exactly where they're at for quota pace, what they have open in the pipeline, what they're currently working, what campaigns are all on their schedule week over week. So, we never let anything fall through the cracks, and we make sure we have, all the content and all the product knowledge we need. So that's the very first thing. And then the very second thing is, just the continuous coaching. Uh, a lot of people might consider it micromanaging, especially if they're succeeding, but it just goes back to that continuous improvement, getting 1% better,
Mhm.
listening to successes of both yourself and your teammates, and essentially leveling up from that perspective. So, it's great that you hit 100% this month. Let's go for 110% next month, to your point about being competitive.
Yeah.
And between those two, I think that's the biggest thing I've experienced.
So I've always and I'm early with this with coaching. I identify myself as a coach. I hate the word manager. I think if an employee looks at me as a manager, I'm doing something incorrectly. I think a manager is a police officer. I think a coach is a mentor. It's kind of just the way I view it. And so I always say to people like, look, if you ever feel like I'm micromanaging you, I'm doing my job incorrectly. I will micro coach you because I assume you are here to learn and develop. And I've never found somebody who's got a student mentality, who's hungry to grow and to learn, who thinks that a coach that's willing to spend time with them to help them get better is a bad thing. If you're looking at the attention I'm giving you as a bad thing, you're likely not as coachable as you think, or you're trying to hide from reality, and either one of those are a challenge and a problem. So just to give you a reframing of that micromanagement aspect,
Yeah,
part of
no,
it.
it's good.
The second part of it that you mentioned is you talked a lot about their individual dashboard, and I believe that's one of the best ways as a coach to be able to develop people, which is looking at the law of averages and where that individual stacks up against the individual law of averages. For you and your business, is there a
Mhm.
couple different metrics that you look at to say, this is where I really hone in to see where there's gaps in skills? For me, I always look at the connection rate, the set rate, and the show rates. The three clear high level metrics for me. And I already know, based off of what I know the median average should be, where they fall into that, where my coaching focus should apply. What about you?
Yeah, so those 3 are absolutely fantastic. Those are huge pillars of, what I look at and I build out for them as well. Just building on that as far as activity and quality goes, a couple other things I look at is, unique cadence starts each day. How many new people, new companies are you dropping in? Are you giving yourself enough at bats at the plate? Are you dropping the right ICPs, the right personas into the right cadences that, I've built for this product or this industry?
Hmm.
Really making sure that even before somebody picks up, you have the right messaging, they're in the right cadence, and, you're prepared for any objections. And then the second thing is, you know, it's been, I don't want to say easy, but it hasn't been too difficult for me to build these programs and find success booking appointments, right? The real challenge often comes with getting them from stage 1 or 2 in the pipeline to stage 3 or 4 or 5 to close. Sometimes you just get nice people that are impressed with your messaging or your skill set, whatever it might be, and they'll take the meeting, but they're not really qualified. They're not going to move anywhere. They're not a decision maker. They're not close to the decision maker. So really tracking, if we make 100 calls, we book 20 meetings, what percent of those 20 are making it to stage 4 in the pipeline? If that is 10% versus 60%, we have an issue there, whether it's who we're reaching out to, how we're qualifying, or, just what our messaging is
Do you
in
find
general.
that falls mostly on the SDR? Does that fall more on the account executive? And once again, maybe how the
Uh-huh.
structure of the company is. I always say the SDR get you to the first show meeting, and then their responsibility of the outcome is done. As long as they're a qualified customer who fits the ICP, their ball's done. Ball now moves to the account executive or whatever that presenter level is.
Yep. So in the situation you just described, that part definitely falls more on the account executive or the salesperson to really drive home, the pain points and the challenges that we're looking to solve for them. That being said, I've seen many SDRs who just drop as many people
Of
into
course.
cadences as they can. And as soon as they get a yes without any qualification, they're going to send it over.
Of course.
And then the AEs aren't happy with that because the AEs end up doing the qualification, right? And then they just burn 30 minutes, whether it's 15 minutes on the phone, 15 minutes of research, whoever or however much time that is. And then the SDR's numbers look great, but then you get to the back end of it, their pipeline might be the best, but their actual revenue is near the bottom. And then when you see that as a gap, you got to get to the bottom of that.
So it's a great point, and I completely agree. And I've seen that, right? I've seen that
Yeah.
SDR who just kills the front end of the pipeline, 50% show rate. Half the people no show. When they do show, they have no clue what they're there for. They were just persuaded into showing up at this time for this thing and no clue. In most structure, I think the way to adjust that is the comp plan. Do you agree with me? The comp plan kind of guides the focus more than the ownership of the analytics.
Yep. Of course, again, I feel like I say this a lot, but depending on the
Of
organizational
course.
structure, absolutely. The second company I built the program from the ground up, we were experiencing that kind of issue. So we did change the comp plan to instead of, meetings booked and held, we went for a larger dollar sum bonus per meeting. But it was when that opportunity went to stage 3 and then when it went to stage 4. So there was an SDR that would book 20 meetings a month and make less money than the SDR booking 8 or 10 because those 8 or 10 were getting through to those final stages and actually becoming revenue for us.
Yeah, and that's been an evolution for me in my leadership when we roll. Because by all means, in most of my sales leadership roles, it's not like it's just an SDR team that I'm leading. I'm leading a full cycle
Sure.
sales team, so I'm kind of juggling that back and forth. Well, the SDR's not getting me enough meetings, or this person sucks, so I don't want to set them meetings. I'm going to set it for Johnny because he closes deals,
Mhm.
and like that back and forth that you have. And so yeah, that the one of the biggest really big changes I made is getting creative with the comp structure and aligning the unification of the SDR and the AE to work as a unified team, not like in a pod focused structure. I think is the best alignment I've come up with. But to your point, not every organization has the capability of having a one-to-one SDR to AE. There might be one AE and 4 SDRs. There might be 4 AEs and 1 SDR. Every organization kind of runs
Yes.
differently, but trying to align the need of the outcome. Because I've had the other problem too, by the way, Daniel. I've worked in a fractional leadership role where I've come in and built these teams that ultimately I didn't have the ownership to run long term. And I'll bring in an SDR team, and all I'm there to do is to build the SDR team, and I want to make me and my team look as good as possible. And we're getting demos. We're getting the right people, but the presenter team can't close shit. And at the end of the day, the owner comes to me and is like, you're getting a bunch of meetings, but I'm actually wasting money because I'm paying out all this comp for these shown meetings to your
Mhm.
SDR team, and we're not making revenue on this side. We got a bigger pipeline, but we're not closing deals. So we're not recouping the revenue of the expense that we have there. And eventually, it just didn't work out at that organization having an SDR team, and they abandoned it because they didn't know how to close it, and they didn't want my help in helping them close. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, that's the age old struggle, right? The back and forth. They're not doing their job selling. They're not doing their job qualifying. These leads are bad. We don't have enough. So, it's one of those things where, especially if you have AEs who have never been an SDR
Oh yeah.
or BDR, if they came from something else, those are really tough relationships to build. Not that it's, impossible, but a lot of extra collaboration, a lot of walking through the data together, and a lot of team meetings can really help bridge that gap. So, for example, what I do with my SDRs and the AEs we support is I set up a monthly meeting in addition to the regular communication we'll have throughout the week, where we just go through the opportunities that we have set and we go, okay, here's the 80 that we set last month. How many went from stage one immediately to close lost and why? What trends can we look at? What similarities are there? And then likewise, the ones that maybe have already closed or maybe that are in stage 3 or 4 already, what made those so good? Is it an ICP persona thing? Is it the industry? What cadences are these coming from? What expectations were set on the qualification process? There's a lot of things you can get into, but when you get everybody in the same room and you get to talk through these in more detail rather than just have a 30-minute Teams messaging conversation, it goes a lot quicker and you get to some real truths faster
Yeah.
too.
I would do that like weekly, because I think that the consistency of that, consistent structure while it's fresh on the mind has worked really well for me in a similar way. One of the things that you talked about earlier was kind of incorporating the technology in today's landscape, and we're in a very unique place that, man, when I first started doing this 10 years ago, I mean, we were lucky to have a CRM and maybe a phone system, and be lucky if that phone system had recording capability and all those things. Now, I would say that we're over uh, over focused on technology, and probably that's required, I think, most sales organizations to get away from what I think is the fundamental side of sales, which is picking up the phone and having a conversation. Where do you think, like, if we look at an organization, try to make it simple for you, and what do you think are the three most slept on tools that a sales team should have, and what are the three maybe like overly discussed or overused tools that you've seen? And maybe you don't have three, but let's lay it out in that sense.
Yeah. So, as far as the slept on tools, I really think a strong information, whether it's intent, getting, direct lines and email addresses is always slept on, especially because oftentimes they'll have big price tags. I've used Zoom Info in most places of my career. And if I didn't have Zoom Info at these companies, I would not have been anywhere near as successful as I would have been. So, there's a lot of different competitors out there. There are some that are better for, North, South America, EMEA and other regions as well. But having something like that to give you a foundation where you can make those calls and not just rely on, marketing lists from trade shows or purchase lists or things like that. I mean, that makes a world of difference and it's well worth the cost, even though you might get sticker shock from from some of those tools. And, really then the second thing is having a CRM is, essential, especially if you can integrate, but having a real sales automation tool like an Outreach or a Sales Loft that can do, phone systems directly out of it. So you can have all your data on cadences, phones, emails, all the, connect rates, all of that stuff all in one system. It's just a world of difference for reporting and for managing the day to day, both as a leader and as an SDR. So, I mean, those are the 2 very basics, the foundations that I would say are crucial in that sense.
How important is like automations, sequences, email integrations? Like, how important is that into the day-to-day side of your SDR team?
Oh, it is absolutely crucial for the day-to-day of my team. We have so much on our plate. We have so many different marketing teams here that are reaching out to us that want us to help them, right? Because we can boost their numbers, we can get their campaigns to be more successful. So having some automation built into those cadences saves us a lot of time, and it still allows us to get out a tailored and personalized message because we don't just have one cadence for this industry or one cadence for this persona. It's this product, this industry or ICP, and then this persona within that. So I have a lot of cadences out there. It might be overwhelming to newer SDRs to pull up, oh, which cadence do I drop this in now? Because there's 50 of them staring at you in the face. But, you know, once you read the titles and you get used to how you operate on that umbrella, it's such a game changer as far as the volume you can reach out to and the volume you can do on a day-to-day basis.
Um, what do you think for your team gets you more appointments? Calls or emails?
Calls for sure. Cold calling is not dead at all. I see that all the time on LinkedIn and people downgrading calling and, ripping into cold calling, but it's by far our best system. And there's not a lot of people cold calling anymore, consequentially, because of that attitude, but everybody and their mother is emailing. There's so much noise to cut through, whether it's marketers, other SDRs. And, on the email front, they're all kind of doing the same thing. We all follow, these thought leaders on LinkedIn. There's a lot of literature out there on sales development, especially with AI coming into the picture. And all of that is great and fantastic, but if you can get somebody on the phone engaged with you one on one, there's nothing more powerful than that.
So I know that one of the things that intrigued me about some of your experience, you're a member of SDRleaders.com. You're a member of SDR Leaders of EMEA. I don't know what that stands for. Maybe you can help me. And then you also are SDR Leaders of USA. You are the Dallas chapter head. I've never been a part of any of these type of organizations. What do they provide to you? Running them and being a part of them. What do they provide to you?
Yeah, so first EMEA, sorry, just stands for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa.
Okay.
As with one of my organizations, I did have some BDRs overseas in Europe, so I joined it for that. But those organizations, the big thing that they provide is, a place to connect with like-minded leaders in the space to share ideas, best practices, ask questions, and, learn from each other essentially. So we can all make each other a little bit better and, have a safe space to talk about things as opposed to talking about it with your marketing leader or your sales leader. I've been very thankful that, SDR Leaders of USA has allowed me to be the Dallas chapter head. I do have one other chapter head colleague, so we're kind of co-chapter heads. But, we just had an in-person event. We did a coffee and breakfast thing in downtown Dallas a few weeks back where it was just 12 of us in a coffee shop, a rented room, and we just whiteboarded a bunch of ideas and we talked through some struggles we had. And it was very beneficial, especially the stuff pertaining to, AI. And a few of the people were brand new in the role, so they were looking for ways to, help build some credibility and camaraderie with demand gen marketing and the sales teams. So that's pretty awesome. And then the SDRleader.com group, they'll do quarterly or bi-quarterly dinners at the different cities that they have members for. So very similar. We all get together and we talk about those things. And SDRleader.com also has an annual pipeline conference that's here in Dallas as well. And, it's 2.5 days of various sales development and sales leaders all coming together to talk on different topics, share their experience, roundtables as well. And, it's just a place to meet with many people and really get together and learn the latest and greatest of what's out there.
How often do you guys do like get-togethers? Like, let's say in the Dallas one that you are a chapter head of. How often are you guys getting together? Are there events, dinners, chats, side chats, coaching sessions? I mean, how does that go?
Yeah, it's typically quarterly, and then it's usually either, the morning coffee breakfast or it's like an evening happy hour type situation. But it's always, in a run-in conference space, with a whiteboard or some place for us to really sketch out designs and ideas for what we're talking about. So uh about quarterly, and yeah, those are always very beneficial.
And I know some of these, it looks like they're maybe kind of like invite only. Some of them I think are kind of more global in that capacity. Like if somebody wants to join one, if you're an SDR new to that side, what would you recommend is like, how should they or could they get plugged into other organizations like this? And if so, what is the organization that you would suggest they should plug into?
Yeah, so for the SDR leaders organizations, it really is meant only for leaders. So if you're a SDR yourself, they do have a verification process for both. So you wouldn't necessarily be let in that instance. But, if you're a leader, it's really as simple as just going to the website, applying to get in. There's no entry fee, there's no monthly or annual fee or anything like that you have to pay. And you still have access to all the great resources that they have, whether it's, like a content driver page, or there's even a Slack channel for SDR leaders of USA where we all have different topics and different groups within there that we collaborate on new ideas with, and kind of some of the things we do at the roundtable as well. If you're an SDR though, and you are looking to join some groups, there are quite a few out there that even I've joined in the past and found very beneficial. One is the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals, AAISP. They have a lot of great free resources, great networking, and a lot of BDRs, SDRs have used that to really level up their sales skills to become AEs. There's many other, sales organizations as well that aren't just focused on inside sales. And then, some of the few I've heard of is the National Association of Sales Professionals, NASP, and then there are a few others out there
Yeah.
too, but just kind of depends on what focus you're looking for.
Well, man, I mean, you've been a wealth of knowledge here. I like to talk to other people that are in this space, especially people that are not necessarily from the exact area I am. And it's so interesting how much we've come to a very similar conclusion with a very different background, right? I've
Yeah,
never
for sure.
actually been an SDR. I've built almost all of my teams foundationally from that. I believe
Oh, wow.
that everybody should be um, able to do the role of an SDR, but I've never been hired or paid by a company to be an SDR. I um, believe that in order to lead a team of SDRs, you need to get on the phone, make the calls, do the job, set the appointments, get the objections, deal with the volatility of the no's. And I think that you should do that in every role. And I think that you shouldn't be leading an organization of any people in your team if there's a role inside of that that you lead in which you cannot do as
Mhm.
good or better than the people that you're leading to do that with. So there's definitely been a focus for me. It's so interesting to see, though, even though we come from two different worlds, we kind of have very, very similar philosophies and similar conclusions. For the audience, what final words do you have for us, Daniel?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say is, some of the great things that or some of the great qualities that make an SDR are some of the great things that make a leader too. So, being coachable from whoever you're reporting to, our focus on continuous improvement as leaders, you know, don't let that get to you, especially if you're a new manager, think, I finally made it to the top. I'm good now. No, we need to be just as focused and just as driven because things are constantly changing in the world of sales development and you can never get too stagnant or comfortable.
Yeah, I anticipate that in the next 5 years, the amount of change that will happen in the SDR world will be more in the next 5 years than it's been over the past 50 years. Just with the growth of technology and the advancements, AI coming in,
Oh,
and I'm a firm believer if you are not challenging yourself every single day to really, really understand how AI can benefit you in sales, you're probably going to be left in the dust in a very short period of time. I'll
yeah,
make sure,
absolutely.
Daniel, I put all of your information in the bio so everybody knows how to get in contact with you, follow you, connect with you, hopefully get
Oh,
invited
thanks.
to some of your SDR leadership stuff, and that would be great. Until next time, everybody who's watching, like, share, subscribe, engage with Daniel, engage with our content. The more engagement, the better it helps us. Appreciate you guys. Talk soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.